could just give them your name and your address and...
For the editor, Hobie Billingsley, 746 Pepper Ridge Drive, Bloomington, Indiana, 47401. Anything else? Telephone number, 812-336-8144. I want you to know that I'm intelligent.
That has never been a question. All right, Hobie, why don't you take me back to when you first met Lesley Bush and tell me a little bit about her.
I think I met Lesley actually about 1963, if I recall, because you were there. And with Rick Gilbert, I came to Philadelphia with Paul Flack, who was his coach in the summertime, and it was just at the end of the summer in 1963. And Lesley was there, and they introduced me as this young upcoming girl, and I met her, and I watched her dive a little bit, and I said, well, you know, she's about where she should be. She was 15 years old then, and she'll be doing pretty good. And then the next time I saw her is when I went to my first Women's National Championships in 1964 in Pittsburgh. I had just started to coach girls. You know, there was no programs in colleges for girls. So I started one at Indiana because there was no place for a girl to dive. And my first nationals was at Pittsburgh, and when I walked in there was Lesley, who I'd met before. I recognized her, but I didn't know her well enough to talk to her or say much to her. So she dived in the national championships, and she didn't qualify for anything. She just was another diver in a contest, took 15th, 16th place or something like that. So when the contest was over, I was getting ready to leave like everyone else, and her father walked by, who I recognized, and from nowhere, absolutely nowhere. I had no thought, no feeling about it, nothing. And for some reason, it was just like God just came down and pushed me to Don Bush. I says, Don, why don't you send your daughter Lesley out to Indiana University? I says, I see a little talent there. There's an outside chance that she could possibly make the Olympic team. He said, well, why don't you go ask her? She's outside. So I went outside, and I was up on a little deck, and she was down on the grass, and I looked down at her. She's got green eyes. And she was standing down there, and I says, Lesley, I'm Hobie Billingsley. Remember me? And she says, yeah, I met you last summer. And I says, what's the chances of you coming out to Indiana University? And she twirls her hair like this all the time. And she looked up at me, and she says, well, I'll think about it. I said, okay. I left, all right? Done. That's in April, about April the 4th, 1964. Somewhere about the beginning of April or of May, I get a telephone call, and it's her father. And he says, hello, this is Don Bush. And I says, oh, hi, Don. And I'm thinking, Don, who's Don Bush? I couldn't even remember. And he says, well, we've talked it over, and we think that we'd like to send Lesley out to Indiana University to dive with your divers for the summer. And I says, well, there's only an outside chance. You know, she hasn't done a thing yet. She's never proven anything in any contest. And he says, well, we'll send her out. And he says, do you think you could do anything with her on tower? I said, well, I don't know. She didn't dive tower. Does she dive tower? He says, well, she's dived off of it. And I said, well, I can't tell you because I don't know. But we'll look when she comes out. So she came out, and now she's going to dive with Rick Gilbert and Kenny Sitzberger, who were then recognized as probably the finest divers in the world. So she came out and dived with us, and we didn't have a pool. We had to dive at the Bryan Park Pool, which is a community pool down the road, and we had an outdoor pool, which was no tower on it, nothing. No, it was all Bryan Park. That's what it was, because we didn't get the pool until later. So we had to go up to Indianapolis every other day to dive on the tower. So we took her up, and we dived off of that for the rest of the summer, about 5 weeks. I taught her a full list of dives on the tower, and her springboard diving seemed to be coming along real well. And we took off for the Olympic trials in New York City. Now, I was thinking that Gilbert and Sitzberger were going to be the divers in this contest. They're the only ones that ever even had a chance. She was just sort of coming along for the ride. She was like a mascot with our team. So we got to the Olympic trials in New York. She dived in the springboard, and right from nowhere, all of a sudden this girl is diving with the best in the country. And she goes into the last dive in 3rd place, and all of a sudden I'm starting to get excited. I thought, well, my gosh, where did this come from? Because I'd never seen her do anything like this before. She was in 3rd place, and then a diver for Patty, I have to think of her name real hard, but Patty came in and did a real good dive and knocked Lesley out of a position on the team. They took the top 3 in those days. Now they only take 2. And she came out crying her eyes out and whatnot, and I went over and put my arm around her, and I says, it's all right, Lesley. I says, boy, gosh, I says, you moved up to 4th place. You never even made the finals before. And I said, you want to know something? I think you're a better tower diver than you're a springboard diver. So what do you think of that? She said, well, I just learned how to dive tower. I can't do anything on the tower. I says, hey, you got another day tomorrow. You take a shot at it and see what happens. So she goes in the next day, and she starts to dive, and her first dive was a back dive. And she really dropped it right, and she really nailed it. And the scores were 9, 9, 9, 8.5, 9, 9, 9, 7. I gave her the 7. So this knew, now you know how much I knew about her diving. And Ron O'Brien was right next to me. He gives me a shove like this. He says, hey, what are you doing? That's your kid. Give her a score. Well, as it turned out, she dived through the contest, and she took second place, made the Olympic team. Everybody in the place was shocked, including me, probably more than anyone. And she says, and they says, well, that's a fluke. She shouldn't be on this team. She just got lucky and made the team. And I wasn't the coach. Yeah, it was Dick Kimball and Dick Smith were the Olympic coaches. Well, I was supposed to get tickets because Sitzberger made the team from his father, was going to give me tickets to the Olympics. I didn't have any tickets. I didn't have any money either. Us coaches didn't make anything. I left for Japan, Tokyo, Japan, with $500. $400 was for the round-trip ticket to get over there. So I walked into Japan with $100 in my pocket, went over to the pool, and it hadn't started yet, so I could get into the pool. Now this is like 5 weeks later because they had to go on a training, they had to go to train for the Olympics. So I walk in and I run into Dick Smith, who's the women's coach, and I says, how's she doing, Dick? What does she look like? He says, oh, terrible. She'll never make it. She'll be last. She's last. She's hurt herself. She's got a strain in her shoulder and her back, and she's taped from her underneath her arm all the way down her waist. And he says, she's totally demoralized. He says, she'll be dead last. I'm sorry. He says, we tried everything. We can't do anything with her. So she came over, she climbs out of the pool, walks over, and she says, Mr. Smith, I appreciate what you've been trying to do for me, but I don't want you to coach me anymore. My coach is here now, and I want him to coach me. I just about ran out of the place. I was so embarrassed. He says, Lesley, I think we can be grown up about this. She says, you be any way you want, but you're not coaching me anymore. So she walked away, and I says, Dick, I didn't come over here to cause a problem. I said, why don't I go over and stand on the other side of the pool, and if she comes over, I'll help her. If she comes to you, you help her. Is that fair enough? He says, fine. But she wouldn't go near him. So this is a couple days before the contest, and all of a sudden, as we get closer to the contest, she started looking like a diver. And yet, anyone that you would ask in the pool, all the coaches I knew throughout the world all said, no, she's never going to make it, she's last. Well, when it got around to the contest, when the Olympics started, I couldn't get in anymore. I didn't have any money, and I didn't have any tickets. So I tried to sneak in for 2 days, and I couldn't get to the first gate because they didn't have anything. And a good friend of mine, Jack Barnett from Australia, looked just like me. He's bald, and he had horn-rimmed glasses. We looked a lot alike. So he says, why don't I give my ID to Sue Knight, my diver, and she'll bring out the ID and see if he can sneak in with that. And so it worked. And here's these same guys I've been seeing for 2 days trying to get together, I was able to walk in. And then I had to hide all the time when they came near me, like in the men's room, because I didn't have any ID. Well, as it turns out, the first contest is with Kenny Sitzberger, and Kenny Sitzberger's diving a contest, and he gets beaten 9 out of 10 dives and wins the contest. That's exactly like a guy running a 100-meter dash in the Olympic Games and falling down and getting up and still winning. It was impossible. It was an absolute miracle. No diver in any contest since I've been in the sport, which has been over 55 years now, have I ever heard of anyone even come close to doing something like that. It was a miracle. But the real miracle was yet in front of us. So we won an Olympic title, and I'm still sneaking in. And I remember I went back into the room with these guys, and I says, hey, guess what? Kenny Sitzberger won. But what if Lesley Bush won? They all laughed like that. They said, there's no way she's last. What are you talking about? She's just a beginner. She's only been diving for a couple months. I said, yeah, but what if she won? He says, you'd be the greatest coach in the world. I says, hey, I'd be God if I could have that happen. All right? So we get ready for the contest. The next day is the 10-meter tower for women. And Lesley is the last diver in the contest. And we're all sitting there, and I'm real happy because I've got an Olympic champion. I got this big Bolex camera taking pictures of everything that's going on. And unfortunately, it had 3 lenses on it, and I used that camera for months. I got so excited I put the wrong lens on it, and I don't know it, but I'm taking a picture of the ceiling. The whole Olympic Games, I'm still looking through a peephole, and all I ever got was the ceiling. So the contest starts, and here comes Lesley. Now Lesley is just a kid, just a little girl. She gets up and we're all sitting there watching, and all of a sudden you hear boom, 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 and I hear the people around me say, "Who was that? Who was that?" And they were looking at they have to look at the schedule to see what's going on. They says, "That was Bush from the United States." And the scores came up, the composite scores came up, and all of a sudden we look up, and Lesley Bush is first. Now Ingrid Kramer's in this contest had won 3 gold medals, 2 in Rome, 3-meter springboard and tower, and had just won the 3-meter springboard. And she's a cinch to win this. Unless she kills herself, she's going to get the 4th gold medal. And so here comes Lesley over after the first dive, curling her hair again, looks up at me and says, "Hobie, Hobie, how am I doing?" Now this is how serious we took this. And I says, "Lesley, guess what? You're the greatest diver in the world for one dive. Keep it up." "Oh, okay." She goes back up, second dive. They do 7 dives in the contest. Second dive, we look up again. Bush is first, Kramer's second, and a girl with a name this long in Russian is third. Third dive comes up. We look up again. She's still ahead by like a half a point. Now the Russian is second, Kramer's third. They come up with the first optional dive. We look up again. She's ahead by a point. Kramer's second again, Russian girl's third. And then they stop the contest and they do the 3 other dives that evening, 1 compulsory and 2 optionals. So I'm being interviewed by Tom Carnegie, who is a newsman out of Indianapolis who does the commentating for the 500-mile speedway races every year. He's interviewing me about Sitzberger. I'm sitting there getting interviewed like I'm talking to you. And about halfway through the thing, I'm looking at this guy and I says, "Tom, I can't talk to you anymore." He says, "Are you sick?" I says, "No, I can't talk to you." "Don't you get it, Tom?" I says, "It was a miracle that Kenny Sitzberger won. But I got a little 16-year-old girl in there who's never even dived tower before. She's never dived. She's never been in a contest. She's never gone any place. She's in the Olympic Games, 5 weeks practice. She's learned, and she's in there with a chance to be the greatest diver in the world." I says, I'm so excited. I says, "I'm so shook up, I can't even talk to you. I have to get up. I got to go." And I walked out, and the guy says, "Where's this guy going?" So we walk in that night. She gets up and she does her first compulsory dive. 700 million people are watching this on TV. And she gets up and does her first compulsory dive. We look up, she's still ahead. 3/4 of a point. She gets up to the next dive, a double twisting 1.5 somersault. We look up again, and she's still ahead. We're down to the last dive. And I'll tell you, I've never in my life ever been this shook. So I'm sitting over there, here she comes. Her last dive is a 2.5 somersault pike. She comes walking over like this, and she says, "Hobie, what do I do now?" And like any coach, I'm saying, "Now Lesley, do this, do that, Lesley, do that, do this." And all of a sudden I stopped, put down the camera, and started to cry. And I was just crying. I says, "Lesley, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. You've already proven to me that you're the greatest diver in the world. Just get up and do this stupid dive, all right?" "Well, I don't know why you're telling me to do that." So she runs over to the tower, and I remember that she had a tendency to go over on this dive a lot. So I put the camera down and run around behind her. "Lesley, come here, come here." She said, "Yeah, what?" I says, "Whatever you do, don't go over. Stay out a little bit, but don't go over. If you don't go over, you'll win it. Just don't go over. Go strong, but don't go over. You hear?" "Well, all right." She goes up. She stood there. I've never gone anything like this in my life. She stands there and she stands there, trying to make up her mind what she's going to do. Everybody in the place is like this. Everybody in the world is watching this kid. Just a kid. And she stands there, and I couldn't watch. I climbed out of the stands. I'm behind the stands. I'm going to look. "No, I can't look. I got to look. No, I can't look." Finally, I says, "I've got to look." And some woman was sitting there, and her legs were hanging down. I took her legs and spread them apart like this to see her. And when I saw her, she was going this direction, and she's like this. As I see her going by, I landed on my knees on the floor, and I says, "Oh, my God, she went over. Oh, my God. A chance of a lifetime." And she just blew it. I'm looking for 4.5s. 6.5s and 7s that will win it for her. I'm on my knees, and I says, "Oh God, what a chance, and what a tough thing to have happen to that little kid." And I wait and wait and wait forever, and all of a sudden the scores start to come up. 7, 7, 7.5, 7, 7. I jumped up to run to get to her, and ran right into the wall. And I hurt my arm so bad I couldn't lift my arm up, and I run over to her, and everyone is jumping on her. I run over and I grab her, and I'm crying my eyes out. And I said, "My God, Lesley." I said, "You did it." And she's going, "Well, I don't see where I did anything so great." Now this is her. And I says, "You'll find out." You'll find out. I took her out that night, and in Japan at that time, in the village, they had bicycles, like 1 million bicycles. I got on the handlebars of the bicycle going across to take her out for dinner. And I says, you can have anything you want. Champagne? She says, I'll have a Coke. Well, when she won, the Associated Press called up her father at home, which was 3 o'clock in the morning in Princeton, and says, congratulations, your daughter just won the Olympic gold medal. And he says, oh, that's a heck of a trick to pull on somebody in the middle of the night. And he hung up. They had to call him back up again to tell him, no, it's true, she won. But this is Lesley. And she won this thing, and she went home. And I said, and she decided to come back to Bloomington to go to school. And she came in as a freshman. And I says, Lesley, everybody in the world thought it was from the beginning that it was a fluke. You made the team as a fluke. Who in the world could have ever won an Olympic gold medal with 5 years of practice, 5 weeks of practice, and be the best in the world, be the best diver in the world, who didn't miss anything? How could that be? It's never been done before. It'll never be done again. And because it's such a small sport, it was probably the greatest upset in the history of the Olympics. But because it's diving and it's a small sport, and she's so modest about everything, that it was just passed over. You know, and she went on. She came to school and I says, everyone said it was a fluke, Lesley. Are you going to let that be a fluke? Well, she went on and won the World's Championships. She won the Pan American Championship. She won about 7 or 8 national championships. And I can remember a time when she was diving to 1 meter in a contest and she was going to lose because she was using the front dive with a full twist. So we changed the dive 5 minutes before the meet started, and I changed the dive to an inward dive with a half twist. She tried 2 of them in her whole life, and she did the dive and won the national championships. Now, what is this about this young lady that could do this? I think that it was just a few things that made her special. And one is that she believed me. And when she went to the Olympic trials, I had no idea that she'd ever even qualify. I didn't see it. It didn't show. And from out of nowhere, this girl was able to be able to control herself. She'd be excited, but she could control herself under stress. She could control her fears. She believed in herself, and she was able to listen and do what she was told to do. And the greatest thing about her is her modesty. You can't get it out of her that she ever won anything. She'll occasionally mention to somebody if they ask. But she went on and won all these championships over her life, and she's never changed. She never changed since that time. The only thing that's changed is her physical features, which we all change. But she was able to reach inside of herself and be able to control herself under stress, which to this day, every time I ever think of her, it's like looking up at the North Star to me. You know, it's like I did with Mark Lindsay when he won. I says, Mark, if you just listen to me, I'll take you to the moon. I'll take you to the moon if you just listen. And when he won his first World Championship, I remember I was hugging and I whispered in his ear, welcome to the moon. And that's Lesley. And Lesley she went for the stars and she got them. But again, she's just a wonderful person who did the impossible. It was a miracle. And I'm writing a book, as I told you, Steve, called The Double Miracle. I had 2 kids that won 2 Olympic, the highest awards you can win in the world, and both of them won under tremendous odds, got beat 9 out of 10 dives, and still won. And here's a girl, 16 years old, her first major contest of her life, and she wins a gold medal, and it was the Olympic gold medal. How could you beat that?
Unbelievable story. Let's take a break there. Yeah.
You can hear.
Hi, Steve.
Okay.
You're back there.
How can that be?
All right. So the question comes up, how could it be possible that in one Olympics that you have one youngster that wins the Olympic gold medal and got beat by his teammate 9 out of 10 dives and still won? And that was because Frank Gorman was diving against Kenny Sitzberger, and Gorman had beaten him 8 out of 8 dives in a row. And Sitzberger comes over to me and starts to cry, which he was not the type because he was a strong, strong kid. He says, Hobie, I'm beaten. He's beaten me. I'm 52 points behind. How could I possibly beat him? He says, he's beaten me. I got him by the shoulders, shaking him. I says, wait a minute. You know he has a bad back 2.5 somersault tuck. If he misses that dive, and you hit a reverse 2.5 somersault, there's a chance you can still beat him. Don't you get it? You can do this, Kenny. And I'm shaking his shoulders like this, and I look over his shoulder, and I'm watching his mother and father walking out of the building. Well, it happened just as we predicted. Gorman got up and did a back 2 1/4, landed on his back and got 2s, and Sitzberger got up and did a reverse 2 1/2 somersault and got 8s, 8 1/2s. Gorman came back on the last dive and beat him again, doing a reverse 1 1/2 somersault layout to Sitzberger's back 1 1/2, the 2 1/2 twist, a reverse 2 1/2 twist. I can't remember which one. And it turned out that Sitzberger still beat him by 3 points. How could it be? How could a little girl, 16 years old, never dived a tower, go into the Olympic Games on her first actual meet in her life, dive from 10 meter, and beat the greatest diver in the world? How could it be? This is why it happened. This is the other side of the story. I started coaching at Indiana University in 1959, had no divers. The school was on 4 years probation because the football team had cheated twice, and they put the whole school on probation. By luck, just by luck, I tried to recruit Rick Gilbert to come here. I heard he was a good diver. Never met him, didn't know a thing about him. I write to him, he never answered back. I just kept writing to him like a diary, and all of a sudden he started writing back.
Excuse me, can you pick that up again? I want to change the shot again.
Where?
Got a little movement. Right there, talking about...
Okay, Gilbert?
No, about the probation.
Oh, this is when Doc Councilman and I went to Indiana University in 1959, when we got there, the football team had cheated twice. And the whole school was put on probation, all the sports. We had no control over this thing. And I had no divers. No one wanted to come here because of the probation. And so I had heard about Gilbert, that he was a good diver, so I started writing to him, and no answers. It was just like writing a diary. And all of a sudden, I think out of shame and embarrassment, he started to write to me. Well, the long story is that he made the finals of the national championships, and he was going to go to Ohio State. And I'd been writing back and forth. And you weren't allowed to talk to him personally in those days. So the day of the scholarships came out, I only had one. I called him up on May the 1st, 1961, and says, the hour of decision has arrived, Ricky. What are you going to do? He says, well, I've been to Ohio State. It's a nicer campus in Indiana. And I says, well, I graduated from Ohio State, so yeah, I can see where you say that. And he says, well, they got a great pool over there. You don't even have one yet. And I says, well, we're building one. And he says, and you've never proven anything about what you can do. And I says, no, I'm just a beginner. I'm new in the field. I'm trying to learn. He says, they got great divers over there. I'd be diving with great divers. You don't have anybody. And I says, that's right. And he says, you're on probation. I'd never be able to dive an NC championship. And I says, yeah, I guess that's it. He says, well, I'm coming to Indiana. I'm emotional. I started to cry. I'm on the phone, and I says, you're not kidding me, are you? He says, I believe you. I believe in you. I'm coming. Well, he did the same thing as the other two did. He learned to dive, do a full list in November on a 3-meter springboard, which he never dived before, and he went to his first national championships and beat the best divers in the world by the highest score ever scored by the widest margin, and he did his first diving contest. So he had something going on there. I didn't know that yet. Well, so who comes because of him? Sitzberger comes to Indiana because he wants to beat Gilbert. He knew if he didn't come to Indiana, he'd never beat him. He had to dive against him every day. So Sitzberger comes, and I got 2 divers. This is 1964. This is when I have to skip over the dates because I can't remember when. But Sitzberger and Gilbert were diving together in 1964. They won every major contest in the United States, first and second, every solid contest. So we come up for the Olympic trials, and they're going to select the Olympic coach. Now, you'd think that since I had the top 2 divers, that I should be the Olympic coach, right? Well, they selected somebody else because there's a lot of politics like any other sport, and I was left out. And I'm diving with O'Brien and Kimball in big water shows and whatnot. I'm crying my eyes out all summer because I felt that I was cheated. And Kimball and O'Brien agreed. They says, you're the guy. I don't know what they're doing, but it was another guy from Texas. Strange thing happens. This is where it starts. The guy had a heart attack. He couldn't go. So now they're going to select another coach. Well, Kimball was just starting at the University of Michigan. He hadn't really produced anybody yet. So we take off for New York City for the Olympic trials. And I got 11 kids with me. Gilbert's hurt. He's been out for about a month with a bad shoulder, but he's just getting back so he can dive. and he missed the team like 3 points, and it almost killed me. I wanted that kid to make that team so bad. I'd done anything to get him on that team. But we take off for New York, and we go to, first of all, to Detroit for diversion. One of my divers is from Detroit, so we go in there to dive in an outdoor pool, real nice pool, for a couple of days, and then go into New York to dive. No one knows where we're going. We're staying in 2 motel rooms because we don't have any money. You know, you be one room for 10 guys, right? One guy goes over and says, "Oh, I'll take the room." Then 10 guys move in. Well, we had 3 girls and eight boys. So we went over to this diver's house to have some spaghetti dinner. It was just like the Last Supper. We're sitting around this table, and all of a sudden the telephone rings, and he says, "It's for you, Hobie." I says, "But no one knows where I am. How could that be?" They says, "Get on the phone." I pick up the phone and says, "This is Charlie McCaffrey. He's the swimming coach from Michigan State University. He's dead now, but he's on the Olympic committee." He says, "Hobie, we've been looking for you for a week." He says, "Well, we've had a heck of a time finding you." I says, "How did you ever find me?" He says, "Well, your wife told us the name of one of the boys up here, so we figured this is where you are." Now he says, I says, well, great, Charlie, what can I do for you?" He says, "What's Dick Kimball's telephone number?" I says, "Charlie, you're from East Lansing, Michigan. If you want to know Dick Kimball's telephone number, why don't you call Information in Ann Arbor and ask them, what's this all about?" He says, "You'll find out." Hung up. I sat down at the table again. We're eating spaghetti and meatballs. I'll never forget it. And I started to eat the spaghetti, and I stopped, and I says, "I'll predict that Dick Kimball just made Olympic coach." I went over and called him on the phone. Now, Dick Kimball's one of my finest friends. I said, "Congratulations, Dick, they just made you Olympic coach, is that right?" He says, "Hobie, it's a mistake." He says, "I haven't done anything. You're the man. You're the guy who should have this job." I says, "Well, Dick," I says, "you got it." And I says, "I'm happy for you." I says, "You know how I feel about that. You're a great coach, and you'll do a wonderful job with these kids. So you go ahead and take the job. Go for it." I made all the kids get up from the table and congratulate them on the phone, and they didn't want to. And so when they get off the phone, we sat down to eat again. And as I started to eat, I just realized what they'd done to me. They crucified me. And I remember I was trying to eat, and all of a sudden I started to choke up. I couldn't eat. I spit out the spaghetti. And I says, "Excuse me." I ran out the door, and I ran down the street, crying my eyes out. I got to this bench, and it was a perfect night, big full moon, a little windy, and I'm sitting there and I'm crying, just crying like mad. I said, "How could they do this to me? What did I do? I've done nothing but try to do my best job. How could they do this to me? You know, I deserve this job." And I thought about it for a while, and I thought, if this is the way this is, I don't want this. I'm going home. I'm going to go back and get my bag, and I'm going home. And I kept sitting there. And all of a sudden, things started happening to me I didn't understand at the time. And I said, "Wait a minute. Why do you judge? Why do you coach? Are you coaching for Hobie Billingsley, for him to become a great coach and be famous and all this? Or are you coaching for those kids? Because if you're coaching for those kids, you get back in there and you take them in there and you do the job you're supposed to do." And I made a pact. I looked up at that sky and I says, "God, if I can't be the Olympic coach, please just put one kid on a team, please." That's all I ask, just one. So what happens? We walk in there. I don't get one. I get 2. If we go to the Olympics, one is supposed to be last, the other one gets beat 8 out of 9 times, and I get 2 winners. Because I didn't compromise. I really meant it. Later on, they came to me and said, "Congratulations." The next time around, they said, "You've just been made Olympic coach." I said, "Oh, well, thanks." And I was coaching. I said, "No, thanks." And I kept on going. It never meant one thing to me, ever. Ever. It's not what I wanted with my life. You know, and I never changed. You know, people ask me to this day, "How many national champions and world champions did you develop?" And I said,